Hi, everybody. I'm David Pogue. I'm a correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning and a longtime science and tech reporter. And today we're going to be talking about space and not just exploration, but living, working, medical, and social attributes thereof. This has been a big few weeks for rich white men exploring space. So we're also going to talk about what that means for anybody else who's not. My panelists are all affiliated with Trish, which is a NASA-affiliated fund-making, grant-making organization, which I'll let Jordan explain in a second. But let me introduce you guys. Janeya Griffin is a consultant, entrepreneur, and an advocate for tech, entrepreneurship, inclusive innovation, social justice, and generational wealth, specifically within underserved communities. She is a daughter of two formerly incarcerated individuals, and we should do a panel on you, Jania. At the age of 16, she and her 6-year-old brother were introduced into the world of what it meant to experience hardship. At 14 years later, with 2 degrees, a certificate, and a contracting job with NASA, Janeya became a lead technology transfer specialist contractor and an executive board member for federal labs all over the country. She recently founded a consulting startup called the Commercializer, which helps entrepreneurs monetize their ideas and bridges the gap between resources and historically excluded communities. In addition, she's the co-founder of a creative agency called Con Creates, focused on serving the men, women, and children behind and beyond bars. Recently, Janeya has been conducting a study focusing on increasing diversity in space for historically excluded communities, which generally means anyone but white middle-aged rich men. Dr. Armen Kherlopian is a biophysicist. Is that right, Armen? Biophysicist?
Absolutely.
It wasn't in your bio, but I Googled you. He has offered strategy and innovation expertise to several Fortune 100 companies, as well as government organizations like the FDA and NASA. And he certainly serves as a scientific advisory board member of Trish. Armen completed his MS and BS in biomedical engineering with a focus on algorithms at Columbia. Holds a PhD in biophysics with a focus on machine learning from Cornell, and had a fellowship in AI at Princeton. We're not intimidated at all. And Jordan Lewis is the diversity program lead and project coordinator at the Baylor College of Medicine, and program lead and project coordinator at Trish. Sorry, I might have conflated those two things. Okay. Jordan has a background in project management, financial management, and federal reporting, currently working on an initiative with Trish to increase diversity and cultivate a broader reach within the space, health, and research community. Jordan holds a Bachelor of Arts in Managerial Studies and English from Rice University. Okay, so all three of you have to do with Trish. Who is she?
So Trish is a research institute. We stand for the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. I actually have some slides prepared just to kind of give people an overview of Trish, if you don't mind me sharing.
Please.
All right, I'll just pull them up. Okay. So hi, thank you so much for your introduction. I am Jordan Lewis. I'm the diversity program lead for the Translational Research Institute for Space Health diversity program. So Trish is a institute that is funded through Baylor College of Medicine by NASA. So Baylor College of Medicine is here in Houston, Texas. It's funded by NASA to fund groundbreaking research, and really our charge is to find research that is oftentimes way more risky than NASA can be. So you'll see here, NASA usually focuses on making slow and steady progress with incremental work, and they're usually a lot more risk averse than we are. So we look for wacky or interesting projects that can keep astronauts healthy in space right now, today, and the next few years, and just over the course of our missions to the moon and Mars. So what I do is I am the diversity program lead. We started this program in the last couple of years because we recognize that there is a lack of diversity within our research portfolio because we do solely fund research. We don't do research in-house. And there's just a lack of diversity in the types of people that we see with researchers that are in space health. And we know that this is not just a problem of our institute, but something that's symptomatic of the entire NASA space health community. And so in this conversation, we're talking about the future of space. And we know that we have lots of different types of people in space now than there were, 50 years ago. And so what does that mean? And how do we make sure that the research we fund is also applicable for all types of people? So at Trish, we do solicitations for research, and our SAB, our Scientific Advisory Board that Armen sits on, they help advise us on what kind of projects we should fund and also just general strategic direction for our institute. So that's what Armen does. And this is just a snapshot of our diversity program that I lead that Janeya has been helping us with. So this year we have convened a diversity advisory board similar to our scientific advisory board, which helps us advise on the diversity program strategy and what kind of solicitation or funding mechanisms we want to put out that target for diverse researchers. So that's where Janeya comes in. Her company, the Commercializer, helped us to devise a survey instrument so that we could understand from the perspective of our researchers what they felt like barriers are and why they're not as represented in this field as we would like them to be. And so we've been working this month on the report, and we're really excited about the results that we've gotten. And we are targeting for a solicitation release this winter. So stay tuned for that. But if you can't stay tuned for that, we do have an open solicitation for our postdoctoral fellowship program right now. So definitely, if you know anybody who'd be interested in that, check that out. But that's just a little bit about Trish in a very short time period. But yeah, I'm open for any questions.
I've got one. Can you give us a couple examples of some of these projects that get funded?
Yeah, so we fund in a lot of different topic areas. So in the past, we've done behavioral health. We've done topics in radiation. We actually have we had a separate radiation program. So that is one of the big risks for space flight is that, the radiation effects of space flight, especially over a long period of time. So we have those. We have projects in like sleeping. That's something that we've thought about, like how to optimize sleep for astronauts in space. Because their work days are really rigorous when they're there and performing research. And, the sleep schedule is different because of your circadian rhythm is different when you don't experience a full 24-hour day the same way you would on Earth. So we have one of our projects is a smart sleep project. So it's a good way for us to figure out how to optimize sleep, even if it's not the full 8-hour sleep that you would usually get on Earth. How do you get the most out of that? We have exercise projects. We have lots of medical technologies, a lot of autonomous devices for helping astronauts kind of assess problems that they have while they're in flight when they, don't have access to the kind of doctors and hospitals and things that they would have here, especially if it's like just minor injuries. So we have tons. We have like over 100 projects. So there's a lot. So
I'm some researcher and I come to you and say, can you give me money? And in exchange, I will design an experiment to help with sleep, or how does that work?
So we issue solicitations. So we have a big, So we have a big solicitation called BRASH, which is our Biomedical Research Advances for Space Health. So most of our projects are under that, but we also have, like I said, the postdoctoral fellowship. Those are projects, and we have an industry program which centers on our entrepreneurs. And so those are really interesting projects as well. So we usually solicit under topic areas. So what I was mentioning before, like we'll solicit for behavioral health, like we did that in the past. And so then there's a specific call, there's a specific, it maps onto a risk of NASA. So NASA responds to what they call red risks. And that's how they prioritize how to resolve big issues that they foresee for astronauts in space. And so our solicitations will respond to one of those risks, or usually multiple risks. And that's how you would submit an application based on that.
Gotcha. So Armen, would you say in general, the medical work that Trish does is designed to translate science on Earth into medical benefits for the astronauts? Or is it one of those Tang things where it's to take breakthroughs developed for the space program and bring it to the masses on Earth?
We see it as a loop, David. And given that this is government related, we have yet another acronym. So, as Jordan highlighted, we have Trish, Translational Research Institute for Space Health. And as Jordan also highlighted, radiation. There's an acronym for the various space health hazards that we look to do just that. Innovations that we can have to increase astronaut and even space tourist performance and safety, we bring that back to Earth. So the acronym here is called RIDGE: radiation, isolation, distance, gravity, and environment. And I'll highlight each in terms of the needs in space and the benefits on Earth. So specifically with radiation, as one leaves the atmosphere, there's radiation increasing from the sun, as well as distant stars going supernova. So this leads to key innovations both around spaceship design and even assessing one's tolerance to radiation. Actually, the interperson variability to radiation is quite wide. And as you can imagine, this has implications in terms of cancer screening as well as radiation therapy. The I stands for isolation, and the pandemic itself has underscored this, the mental health impacts around being isolated. Indeed, doing a long distance mission, for example, to Mars, puts unprecedented strain on the space travelers. D, we think about telemedicine. Pre-pandemic, telemedicine ranked less than 10% of clinical visits. Now, in some countries, it's cleared 40%. Post-pandemic, it's unlikely to go below 10%. The communication to Mars is 20 minutes for any information. So this is an extreme strain in terms of advancing telemedicine. G being gravity, the forces that have association also with aging, as one would experience, shifting from the gravitational fields of the Earth, the moon, to zero G. And E relates to environment. Indeed, the water, the air. And as it once was, the high seas were considered a hostile environment, as was is air travel. And with Trish and the emergence of new space industries, including health, we look to boost the safety there.
I gotcha. And just one more thing before you really launch. Janeya, how has the space industry so far been doing with diversity and inclusion? Oh, can't hear you. Uh-oh.
I was on mute. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. So far, in its first 70 years, how has the space program been doing with diversity and inclusion?
I think that the space program has been taking it step by step. I think systemically, a lot of the issues that the world has faced, has really played a role in how quickly we advance when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the intention is definitely there. I think, we could be doing better, right? And, we were kind of talking about, how can you give someone a pat on the back for something that they should already be doing? And so I think, with the push for diversity, equity, inclusion across the board, we've started to see a lot of the RFIs that have been coming out, the request for information on how can NASA be doing better, how can a lot of these organizations be doing better. We see a lot of the media that has gone out around racism and sexism and ageism and all of the isms, right, that we've been experiencing. And so I think it really comes down to everyone actually being able to hold people accountable, being able to show up and do their part as well, because it's going to take a village. It's going to take all of us in order to get us to a place where not only are we giving people a seat at the table, but we're also allowing them to participate in the development of that. We talk a lot around diversity and inclusion, but equity is a really big and important piece that needs to be in the forefront, especially when we want to think about building a new economy, specifically a new space economy. And we don't want to be, just a part of the conversation. We want to be a part of the development. We want to be a part of making those decisions, ensuring that everyone's voice is heard at the table. And so I think we have a bit of a ways to go, but I think we're on the right track to get there.
And again, we're probably not just talking about astronauts, right? There's more to it.
No, you're correct. Correct.
So we've seen in the public mind a big shift in the last few weeks from space exploration being something that NASA does, that scientists do, to joyrides, to people going up in space for 11 minutes just because it's cool and they're rich and they want to take some pictures. Is this some kind of milestone or dam breaking, do you think, or is it's just a coincidence that the long, slow, steady progress toward commercialization has begun with tourism? Anyone?
Is that a question for me? Okay.
That's a question for anyone.
Okay. Well, I'll go first. You said commercialization. That's my favorite word. And so hence the commercializer. But yeah, so I think that, again, going back to the new space economy, when people hear that, they don't necessarily understand what it means. There is an economy of space. We currently have one now, but when we start talking about the new space economy, we start talking about space tourism. We start talking about how do a lot of the research, or what does a lot of the research look like that will be translated into a space application that can be used during those flights, right? So if we start thinking about space tourism, for example, if we think about tourism just in general, right? We think about cruise ships, planes, to get you from one place, entertainment, all of these different things. What does that look like in space? Are we talking about, having consumer items on board some of these spaceships? And if that is so, then who are those companies that are actually providing those goods, right? What does that look like? And so I think it starts to go a lot further and much bigger than just astronauts, than just aerospace. It starts to get into small businesses. It starts to get into, if you think about, hey, I want to have, nail polish, right? What does nail polish look like in space? What does feminine products, right? What does a menstrual cycle look like in space? If we are now to start sending more women, because it's not just men going up there anymore, right? We can't give women birth control and stop their menstrual cycle for 6 months at a time. That's not sustainable. So how can we start to really make the space economy, space tourism, space travel more representative of what Earth looks like in terms of the diversity, not just in thought, but the diversity in people, in cultures, in foods, all of these different things that we will be experiencing. How is that going to look once we are in space? And how many people are going to actually be able to contribute to that, to be a part of that? And I think that's where we're starting to go now. So not just with, sending shuttles to space, doing experiments and different things like that. We'll start seeing that in the future a lot more of how it actually starts to impact our economy.
Excellent. Has anyone done any research on what we think work and industry might be in space? I mean, beyond tourism, like what are the manufacturing advantages in space, or what other industries could benefit from that environment?
Yeah, we can take a few examples. So tourism is on top of mind. And indeed, even these tourism-related flights are a fantastic platform for medical research. So extending an earthbound industry into newer areas. So for example, Butterfly, in terms of its innovative ultrasound device, was recently tested in the last Inspiration 4 flight via SpaceX, via Trish, with some data integrations from Trilix. So there's this idea of analogs and extensions of earthbound industries. So if we take extension of space, of health to space health, there's tourism, there's space tourism. There's also fantastic and tantalizing items around manufacturing and mining. So in the same way, you might order a piece of furniture from IKEA, it arrives in parts to your home, and you assemble it there. That has a logistical and assembly benefit. Indeed, if you are assembling something super massive, there's benefits to doing the assembly in zero G, this being IKEA being out in space. So you can imagine that the factory in orbit would look different than a factory on Earth and could build different things. One servicing things in space, or even bringing things back down to Earth. Another area that requires work is space mining. So we often look up at the moon and we see a barren surface. We might imagine the man on the moon or the person on the moon, but actually there's platinum there. In nearby asteroids, relatively nearby, multi-year missions, there's precious metals for electronics. And all of these emerging industries have a mix of sending humans, sending robots, and extending the environments of which our society resides.
And how much of an industry is there now? I mean, how many companies are looking into this now? Or is it still pie in the sky?
So to pick up, as Jordan and Janeya were saying, to date, in all of space travel, only roughly 500 people have been to space. If we imagine what even space tourism unlocks with Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin, Elon Musk's SpaceX, there is even a stratospheric balloon solution from Space Perspectives. We'll clear 1,000 very quickly, and in our lifetimes, well over 10,000 if we add up the new ventures and the entities. So what we're going from is, decades to 500, and then even an order of magnitude jump. So there's the direct experience of those individuals, as well as the learnings we take away. So much more immediate than saying this is 20 years out, for example.
Yeah. And just to add on to that a little bit, David, to your point about, is it like a dam is breaking? For us, yeah, it kind of is. What Armen was saying about our, Trish recently just sent up some projects on the SpaceX mission. And so for us, from the research side, it like leveraging partnerships with commercial space really helps us to kind of speed up the process for getting projects to space. Otherwise, like in a traditional academic solicitation in the cycle, it usually takes a lot longer to get things to space. But having the buy-in from the commercial side helps us to test out projects and send research to space and get relevant findings for work here on Earth. And in answer to one of the chat questions from Jerry Weinstein, it's not just about tourism. It's not just about building this new economy for the future, but it's also about helping with those space applications and bringing them back to Earth.
I gotcha. In the chat, there's already the question that comes up every time. And in my career, I've interviewed 3 NASA administrators, basically the CEO of NASA. And I always ask this question because it represents what so many Americans think. Why should we spend billions of dollars with these pie-in-the-sky space projects and, let's face it, ego vanity projects recently, when there's so many problems here on Earth that we could spend money on?
Yeah, this is a perennial one. One analogy would be, and indeed this is a tough question and a one that society, as scientists, as researchers, as advocates, as innovators, and general populace, we need to grapple with. I'll draw one analogy to motorsport. The benefits in terms of having a proving ground are substantial in terms of being able to test, for example, automotive safety procedures, items around fuel, harnesses. So the platform of space as an extreme environment has tremendous benefit for us improving safety and health on Earth. And indeed, this is what's happening with the tourism flights, that there is medical research being conducted. We're having more data, more diverse data. Even if we consider, if we break apart space tourists and astronauts, the profile of an astronaut has changed from decades prior of being a jet fighter pilot to that of being someone who can maintain a mental frame of mind sound for many months. And this has all sorts of implications, from even things like how one could be addicted to their mobile phone, which to various degrees we experience in terms of that chime, that drive for our attention. So I'll underscore again, the proving ground of space is highly beneficial of testing our research capabilities, our health countermeasure capabilities, and understanding key parts of even our physiology.
Excellent. And by the way, also some excellent answers in the chat. I don't know how many of you, can the audience see the chat? That's not clear to me. But,
Yeah.
Okay. So as pointed out, the entire NASA budget is 0.48 of 1% of the federal budget. And this would be my answer, by the way. I'm making myself an honorary panelist. And, from that, we've gotten, GPS, artificial intelligence, advances in robotics, as Betsy Barker points out, phone, computer, car, all use spin-off technology from the space program. So well done, audience. I'm sorry, was I interrupting?
No, I was just going to add, so everything that the audience is saying is spot on, right? And for the last 8.5 years, that's literally all I've been doing, is transferring the technologies that have been used in space or developed for space for commercial applications that we use every day that help us in our daily lives. So, from baby formula to the cameras in our phones, the cameras in our cars, memory foam mattresses, so many different things have come from the technologies that have been developed for space missions that we now, benefit from. And so it's not necessarily, I think what Armen was talking about, it's a loop, right? There is an ecosystem. Taxpayer dollars go into furthering the research and the development that takes place. And because the government tends to have the most expertise in in providing us with, that research and development, commercial applications actually come out of that development. And so it is a return on investment for those taxpayer dollars to continue the innovative products, to continue the innovation that is coming out of these labs, so that we can live a better life, right? The internet, that has come from DARPA. I saw somebody actually put that in the chat. But before baby formula was not nutritious, like there was no supplemental value to that at all, until NASA did a study on long duration space flight using algae, right? And so, these are the different things, these are the insights that we're able to glean so that the world can be better for it, so that humanity can be better for it. The other thing that I like to, I would say a little nugget, with some research that I was doing, was that, again, the cost of actually going to space. We spend more in chapstick annually than it costs to send a spaceship into a vehicle into space. And so, if we're thinking about saving the world by taking the budget that NASA has to do space travel, space flight, and science, right? then maybe we should be thinking about having chopped lips for some time, right? And so it brings a little humor to it, but then it also does break down just from the level of, if you're actually looking at it, the reality of it is we don't spend that much, right? And so there are a lot of things that we could be pulling back from: buying your Starbucks coffee, buying, all of these things. If we really want to impact humanity and we really want to, help the world, there are a lot of things that everyone should be cutting back from.
Excellent. I had the opportunity to interview Scott Kelly, the NASA astronaut who spent a year continuously in space, and getting back to some of the ridge problems of long-term life in space that Armen mentioned. He mentioned, yes, the radiation, but also everybody who comes back from a long time in space, their eyesight is worse. Are there any promising developments in any of the ridge problems? I'll give you one more example before you answer. I also did a story about preparations for Mars, habited crewed missions to Mars. And there's an outfit in Hawaii that has set up this, you must know what I'm talking about. It's this tent, this white dome-shaped tent where they send a crew to live there, cut off from the world for a year, to see interpersonally if they can stand to be in an enclosed space for a year without killing each other. And despite the fact that they go through, and why Hawaii? Because it's on this big lava plain, the closest thing they can find to looking and feeling like Mars. And what they've discovered is, even though they screen for easygoing, take it in stride personalities, they've still had a couple of the experiments crash and burn. People had to be taken out. They had to shut down the program because we're not robots. We're kind of problematic animals. So the question is, for any of these topics, is there any news? Is there any reasons to think we might be licking them?
Yeah, so these, the Mueller-Ocular challenge, one stems from changes to physiology, the gravitational fields, the pressures that individuals face. And indeed, the area, yet another acronym, SANS, is one that's actively looked after. So with the recent missions, particularly with Inspiration, there's data collected, and then there's also subsequently looking to have samples. So it's with this sustained approach, we look to gather data for solutions. The implications on Earth are quite profound. Indeed, one key analogy to space travel is an acceleration of aging, which is quite acute, for example, eyesight. So this is a perennial challenge, but data is being collected to help solve this.
Gotcha. On the radiation thing, is it not just a matter of let's wrap this spaceship in lead or something that can stop the radiation?
There's indeed a trade-off, in terms of performance, sustainability. And for example, we can make heavier spaceships, but we'll need more fuel. And this affects their performance profile. And indeed, what we're talking about space is what is sustained performance. To draw another analogy with the automotive field, if you consider Formula One racing, for example, is it performant to go 300 miles an hour, but to do it at 1 liter of gasoline for two miles? So electric vehicles that emerge. So this constant improvement of efficiency and performance is also key. So yes, indeed, material strategies, even water barriers are considered. And this affects, whether the missions are to the moon, Mars, or even beyond, really straining our engineering capabilities. But again, space is a fantastic proving ground.
Wow. Yeah, the chat is on fire. Dorit or Dorit, I don't know who you are, man, but you should be on this on this panel. Points out
Dorit
that,
is the director of the Translational Research Institute.
oh!
So she has a lot of great insights. And to her point, yes, we have funded a lot of ophthalmic devices that help with what Armen was talking about with SANS, because that is a huge NASA risk, because there are some concerns about exactly what causes SANS. And so we've funded some ophthalmic technologies to help us figure that out. Thanks, Dorit, for chiming in.
Pronounce that for me again. Dorit or Dorit? How do you pronounce it again?
Dorit.
Dorit. Okay. So Dorit points out that there's kidney stone research being done in space. I am a kidney stone sufferer. I am one of the cursed. And let me tell you, there is nothing worse. Women who've had both childbirth and kidney stones say that kidney stones are more painful. It is the worst pain that anything that your body can do to yourself. And the technologies we have for addressing it are decades old and really, really Cro-Magnon. Let me tell you, I've been through it. So that's very welcome. So clearly we have a very wise and bright audience. Thin ice, David, Matt says. So let's open up for questions. We have a wealth of information and expertise here. I'm launching a podcast on October 15th with CBS News called Unsung Science. And the whole idea is each episode will dig deeply into the origin story of an interesting scientific achievement. And one of them is about how we landed the rover on Mars. It comes into the atmosphere going 12,000 miles an hour, and it has to hit the surface at less than 3 miles an hour. Otherwise, it'll stir up dust that will coat the cameras and ruin the instruments. So what they've come up with is this absurd, like Rube Goldberg thing, where first they use a heat shield to slow down in the thin Mars atmosphere, and then the heat shield pops off and a parachute comes out. A parachute! And the parachute goes down for a while, and then this jetpack drops out, but you can't jetpack all the way down to the surface because you'll dig a crater and the rover will be trapped forever. So the jetpack only goes down to 70 feet and then drops the rover on ropes and lowers it like a crane. So 4 different stages, and it seems so over-engineered to me, like so completely absurd. And I asked, come on, dude, did you really need all 4 of those things? Like a parachute? Really? Why don't you just use the jetpack thing the whole way? And he said exactly what Armen said. He said, yeah, but the problem is the parachute technique uses no fuel. Fuel is heavy. We would have had to carry the fuel to Mars in the first place, which means a bigger spaceship, a heavier spaceship, which requires more fuel. Anyway, the parachute gets us all the way down, most of the way down to the surface for free without using any fuel. Of all that stuff, by the way, the NASA descent and landing expert I interviewed, of all those stages, the one that gave them most problems was the parachute. Not the robots, not the heat shield, not the explosive bolt cutters, the parachute. They tested it out in Hawaii, and they went up to 130,000 feet, which simulates the density of the atmosphere. And every single time, he called it a confetti cannon. That thing opened and just blistered apart into splinterines. And they finally solved it by making it much thicker and much stronger, but they only tested it twice before the actual mission to Mars. So he was losing his mind. Okay, Steve asks, what will space exploration look like 10 years from now? Anyone want to tackle that?
Sure, I can kick us off here. So a few things. One is in 10 years, diversity will indeed be up in terms of the profile of astronauts being recruited. And even as we have these hybrid profiles, the Inspiration mission recently that Trish was instrumental in had a civilian crew. So you had civilians engaging in medical research. So this is somewhat analogous to citizen science, whether it's a protein folding challenge or people labeling data that can be used for different applications. Driverless cars, for example, annotations of important source data. One thing that will be most intriguing is a race among nations in terms of the next generation of space station. We'll have increasingly this idea that space stations will emerge as small cities, then than that of individual spacecraft. And that transition should be most intriguing to watch over the coming decade and beyond.
Interesting. There's actually a question in the chat about is international competition good for space exploration? I'm already a little troubled by, I'm sure you're aware of SpaceX's constellation of thousands of small satellites designed to bring internet all over the world. Well, that's great, but astronomers can't stand it because they have all these thousands of bright reflective things, and space junk. Oh my God, it's a space junk nightmare. When these things, die, they're supposed to fall down and burn up in the atmosphere and not cause problems with other, like the space station and rockets. But in fact, many countries are launching those same constellations, not all of which have those same fall and burn up on defunctness technology. You do got to wonder, is it a good thing to have an uncoordinated planet of rival countries shooting stuff up there?
Well, I think here, you've hit on a new industry. We've talked about space health, space tourism, space manufacturing, space mining. And as our director, Dorit, highlighted, this is what we're talking about, space waste management. And indeed, the industrialization of an area will be highly uncoordinated unless there's cooperation in terms of international accords. So indeed, policy is incredibly critical in terms of doing this responsibly, as indeed space is not barren. It's part of an environment, particularly when we consider near Earth orbit.
Yeah, I actually did a story on this space debris issue a couple months ago, and part of the issue is that, yes, coordination among countries is what we need, but China and Russia are not going to send satellite location data to our government. Yeah, that's a non-starter. So it's a problem. All right, so why don't we take one more? Let's see. There's some good ones here. What is the 21st century version of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence? Are you guys familiar, I take it?
Yeah, so this relates to our search for sentient life out there, and this ties to algorithms. It also ties to the earlier Voyager missions. The golden record being sent out past our solar system. So one very exciting thing, and David, it highlights even to the Rube Goldberg example, in that descent stage there was computer vision used to guide the descent as well. So you have yet another layer. So I think in terms of signals that we would send out and the activities we are doing, there'll be more data broadcast and more sophisticated algorithms looking for responses. And if there's indeed responses, I believe that will be a note to increase diversity of our universe.
Yeah, diversity can take all forms here. Not everybody's human. Let's remember that. The SETI thing, I interviewed the head of that organization too, and he said something. This is when all the news about UFO sightings was coming out this past summer. And I said, so do you think there's intelligent life? He said, intelligent life, yes. The sheer, 100 million planets in this galaxy and 100 million galaxies like it, the odds are overwhelming that there's life out there. But do I think that they're here, hiding, visible only in freak, Navy thermal cameras, but no GPS satellites, no imaging satellites have ever seen them from above? No, I don't think so. Which I thought was interesting for the head of SETI to say that he thinks the whole thing like aliens are here among us, but just they don't want to be discovered. He thinks that's a load. Anyway, Armen, Jordan, Janeya, thank you so much. Audience, thank you so much. You've added so much audience to our discussion. And let me just do one more rapid fire thing for my panelists. If you had the opportunity to take William Shatner's place on the Blue Origin launch next week, would you go? Armen?
Absolutely.
Jordan?
Probably not. I'm an Earth girl.
What do you think, Jania?
I would definitely go.
You would? You
I
did?
would, yeah.
You did see the news with the whistleblower inside Blue Origin saying that they've been cutting safety corners to get Bezos up there before Branson. Okay, just clarifying. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you for the great work you're doing. Here's to a successful, equitable new realm of space.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.